Hi, welcome back to Out of Crazy Town. I'm Jackie Miller. Today I am joined by Shanahan and Karen Chellew, co-founders of My Divorce Solution. Catherine is a certified divorce financial analyst and Karen is the company's legal liaison. Together, they've developed the MDS Financial Portrait, a process that gives people clarity, confidence, and control over their finances before making critical divorce decisions. They also co-host the podcast We Chat Divorce, where they share strategies to help people master divorce rather than just survive it. Today, we'll dig into financial traps, how to recognize manipulation, and how to reclaim your financial power. All right, welcome, Catherine and Karen. Thank you so much for joining me on Out of Crazy Town. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I hope you get me out of Crazy Town.
You are actually going to both explain to the listeners how you're going to help them get out of Crazy Town. How about that?
I love it.
We can do that.
Awesome. The cavalry is here, you guys. So listen up. I'm super excited to have you because I am so passionate about this topic because of what I went through in my divorce. I haven't had a financial, topic on in a while, but it is, to me, of course, children and the custody is extremely important. That is enough said on that. This is the primary thing that happens in every single divorce. And if you're listening and you're in this audience, you probably have a lot of coercive control, maybe, some abuse that happened in the marriage, and it takes on a totally different form. And you have to have some financial professionals in your corner, and you guys have to listen up to what Karen and Catherine have to say today. So thank you so much for joining me, you guys.
We're happy to be here. Really
Good.
excited for the conversation.
So you guys are the founder of My Divorce Solution. You can go to mydivorcesolution.com. We'll remind you again at the end. If you don't mind, would you guys each mind telling me just a little blurb about how you got here? Because I know I always joke that I didn't wake up one day and say I wanted to be a divorce coach when I was little. So how do you end up developing this company that helps people through the financial, aspects of divorce?
It's a great question. And I know that we're unique, so it's really very interesting, but we're like you, we've gone through the process. So I went through my divorce after being with my first husband 23 years, and he was a narcissist, but we didn't really have a financial problem because I handled all the finances. I have an accounting degree. I was a financial advisor. He worked in the finance world, so we didn't have any financial problems amongst each other. So I'm very comfortable around numbers, accounts, and all of that. But when I went through my divorce, I was scared, and I just thought, holy crap, if I'm scared, every woman out there has to be scared because I'm pretty confident about numbers, right? I negotiated my own agreement, but my agreement wasn't written properly or strong enough. So I ended up back in court years later. But just going through that process, I just wanted to help women at that time get through it a better way. So I knew Karen. She had a non-for-profit that I spoke at about finances, and I approached her and I said, it's more than the finances. And I really want to help the big industry, not really knowing the big industry. And she was like, oh, congratulations, great job, because she always supported women and what they wanted to do. And I had to call her back after that lunch and say, no, Karen, I want you to do it with me. Like, we need to do this together. I can't do this by myself. And she was like, oh,
I love it.
I kind of knew she wanted to change from what she was doing from another colleague. And then Karen, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So I originally didn't know what my role would be at the company, but I so admired Catherine and her story and what she was trying to accomplish. So I thought, well, you know what? I'll jump in and figure it out because I was in a transition phase from my work. I had been a paralegal at the law firm I worked at for 30 years. My husband was a managing partner. He had just retired. So I kind of wanted to be done too. It was just seemed like a good break for me to just try something else. So I remember asking Catherine early on, what am I going to do around here? But it quickly became apparent that there was a huge gap between legal representation and financial knowledge. And so we were able to develop a role where we can ask really good questions of legal advocates, attorneys, so that our clients and us can hear the answers as to the strategy, and then we can reinforce that financially so our clients can make really good decisions for themselves. So we just coined the term legal liaison because paralegals cannot operate unless they're under the supervision of an attorney. So, okay, we'll just move ahead as legal liaison. And it's worked out really, really well. And I am so connected to this because of my own divorce. I had been married. My kids were for 10 years. My kids were small. And while I had the best legal representation available in our county, just by virtue of my position at the law firm, I too ended up right back in court within a year of my divorce because my husband had filed bankruptcy. And guess who was still president of his company post divorce? Oh, that would be me. And so, understanding the back end of every asset and debt is so important. And that's what we really work to do at My Divorce Solution, to support our clients financially through this process.
I really want to highlight a couple things that you guys had said because I want the listeners to really take note of this. You have a financial advisor who now is a CDFA, and you have this legal liaison. You guys both went through your divorces. Catherine, you said that you were still really scared, which I think is so important because I think people sometimes look at you guys and go, well, she worked at a law firm and she knew numbers and money. And so they have these superpowers that I don't have. I'm not going to be okay. They're okay because they have these superpowers. That is not true. It is scary for everyone. And even with your superpowers, you both ended up back in court. And here you worked for this law firm, Karen, and you worked, you knew everything about money. Catherine, so my point is, I want to just validate what everyone's feeling out there with the fear. Also, reinforce the fact that you need these professionals that have the battle wounds. They went through their divorces. They saw the mistakes that were made in their own divorces and I'm sure I don't even know how many cases since, hundreds and hundreds, I'm sure. And so that's why I have you guys on today, because you have the scars, you have the knowledge, and I really want people to listen to how much they need you in there. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And I wish I had you 12 years ago as well, because we didn't have these resources, right? When we all went through our divorces. But a few years ago, because I went back to court, oh gosh, it was probably 8 years after my divorce. It was over a piece of property that we still own together. And that's a whole nother podcast, what happened there. But I had Karen and we had our process. So we knew the industry at that point. And literally Karen could have acted as my attorney. She hates when I say that, but she actually prepped me for the whole case, and we prepped my attorney, who actually did a terrible job, even though I won, because he wanted me to settle, even though what my spouse was doing was egregious, and he actually called it a big game in front of the judge. But because got prepared, and because I have the financial knowledge, and because I had Karen's questions to ask, and she laid it all out, I was really confident. But although I was confident, we filmed me. We did an Instagram live at that time, and I was crying walking into the court, getting ready to walk into the courtroom. From when I parked my car, walking in there, I'm crying on Instagram live because I wanted our clients, because they all saw me in that light. And they all see Karen in that light as, oh my gosh, you guys already did this. You're through it. I'm not that strong. So I wanted them to see me crying and be really vulnerable, because it is so scary, and I was confident because I was basing everything on data, and I knew the data inside and out, but I was still at that point, which was only 5 years ago, crying walking into that courtroom. And when I went into that courtroom waiting, there were other attorneys there coming up to me, asking me whose expert I was that day. Because as a CDFA, I could have been their expert. And I was like, no, I'm in here for me. And a couple of those attorneys saw me crying in that courtroom. So it is really scary. But the only way to get through it is to not only have you on their side, in their corner, helping them talk through the emotional side, but going there equipped with the financial data as your backbone is probably the only real true way to get through this process.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just shocked. Here you have your ex-husband admitting in court that he's just playing a big game with you. And then your attorney just wants you to settle. But you're right. If you have the data, in other words, if you've done the homework or you've hired professionals to help you do the homework and organize that homework, and you know your case, you can be confident even telling your own attorney, no, this is the route that we need to take. And I'm not just saying that based on emotion. This is why. Here are the numbers. This is why we're going to go this route. So, wow, that's amazing that you got to be such an example. And, and back to the point that it's scary for anyone. I don't care who you are.
I say, Karen, and I'll talk a little bit about how she prepped me for that case, but there was a quote I read, and I don't know who wrote this quote, but it said, God doesn't give you anything you can't handle. Why does God think I can handle so much? Right. So I truly believe that, but I also believe it's why we have My Divorce Solution. It's the stuff that we have gone through personally and have persevered. And we've just learned, it's market research what our personal lives have been. But she literally sat there as my legal liaison and prepped my case and kept me to focus on the process itself and the data, the timeline. She went over the timeline with my attorney, who was like the pit bull, if you want to use that term, which I hate. He just sat there like nonchalant. And she went through this timeline with him numerous times because he didn't care about me later. He literally at one point said, "Oh, I'll go meet the other attorney for beers and we'll get to the bottom of this." I wanted to like Karen, right? I left there saying, "What the F? He's going to meet for beers?" Karen was a stronger candidate for my attorney than he was. Again, at the end of the day, I won. I got the, what do you call it, Karen? The judgment
Verdict.
I got the defense verdict, which was great. But I was pissed off that we even challenged my bill then because Karen, again, acting as my legal liaison, lined up everything that had occurred. And I challenged him. I said, "I'm not paying for this. And as a matter of fact, I think you should retire," I told him. Because I didn't, Karen, that's Catherine. Catherine just says what she wants. And then sometimes I have to apologize later. But I was like, he's like, "Oh, you two have shown me that I need to do better." I said, "No, I think you need to retire because you're just not doing a good job anymore."
Mm-hmm.
And I won the defense verdict because Karen set it up and I was strong enough financially to stick up for myself. And that's how it happened.
And I want to get into the process of exactly what you do with clients and how that works so that people know what it would be like to work with you. But that's such a good point because maybe this guy should have retired, but let's even take a younger attorney. I had an attorney tell me once they were referring to another case and they were like, "Oh, that case has been circling the drain for like a year now," meaning it's going on and on. Your attorneys get fatigued
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of over your case sometimes. And and again, they might be the greatest attorney on earth, but they're human and they're just like so over you and just over this case. This story real quick, but at the very end of my mediation that went on all day and late into the night, and we got a draft from his attorney, just with the details of what we had agreed to. And I noticed that he had moved this data separation, which he had not argued against or disagreed with for 3 years. He moved it by a week. And I said, absolutely not. And it was a junior attorney. She said, "What's the big deal? It's a week." I said, "Why would he at the last second slip in and try?" And it's not like they left a one. It was like we separated on the 7th and they put the 17th. It was a completely different number. And it was a week off. I said, "He did something that week. I don't know what it is. I don't want to dig it up now, but I want the right data file." And she was so annoyed with me
Mm-hmm.
that I had wanted to go back to them again and correct them and tell them that I'm not agreeing that they changed the date. So anyway, that's my point. I agree. You got to be an advocate for yourself. We're going to get to that even more.
Doesn't that gets my blood going too? She's annoyed at you. She's your attorney because you know why she's annoyed? Because she has to do a little bit more work right now. And the other thing is they say, "Oh, but the judge or the other attorney is going to get so mad at me. I don't want to do that." When I hear that, I literally want to jump through the screen because who cares? I don't care who gets mad at me. It's my life. I'm going away at the end. You're going away at the end of the day. I've got to live with the results. So kudos to you for saying, because he did do something. Otherwise,
Yeah.
there's no need to change the date. So good for you for sticking up for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. But again, yeah, it's why you do have to stick up for yourself and be your own advocate. But okay, guys, everyone on that's listening wants to know how this works. How do you work with you? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm putting the Jackie Miller stamp of approval. You have to hire these people. And this is the next question after you tell me. The next question is if we think that they should hire you before an attorney. But first, tell me how it works.
Yeah. So we have a divorce, we call it a divorce preparation platform. All right. When the pandemic hit, we had offices across the United States. The pandemic hit. And what did we do? We developed software, which was really worked out well because it does provide a level of security and confidentiality that most people do not have available to them in this process. So they're able to go in and work with our entire team on the platform. They provide their data and documents, Everything is structured. So we start with income and you go through every category, exactly how the court system looks at your assets and debts and income and expenses. And we initially want to know what you have and what you know. And I tell people that it's not so much that for our benefit, it's for your benefit, because we start to understand how you view your financial status or your financial literacy, or how you interpret financial information. Everybody looks at it different. Catherine and I look at it different. Everything I say, Catherine looks at it the other way, but it's the same end result. So it's just, we all process financial information differently, and it helps us understand that. And then from there, you give us all you have and all you know, and then we start our work with all of our advisors here. You'll go through a budget exercise, several of them. We go through the lifestyle analysis, and then you have your first initial review with your divorce financial specialist. And our divorce financial specialists are unique financial specialists because they're CDFAs and trained mediators. And that combination allows them to provide services in a way that helps our clients articulate their goals in a more impactful way, and also if their spouse wants to participate. So we go through several consultations to help you know, this is your marital estate. We need more information and documentation here. A lot of people believe they have less access to documentation than what they really have. So we hop in and help them with that. If they have attorneys on board or other divorce professionals, we engage with them so that their entire team is working together from the same perspective. And then we move on to division scenarios. We work with their goals to build out options for them so that when they're ready to negotiate, they can do it with confidence and knowledge, not only from the data standpoint, but they know they have the supporting documentation to stand behind.
That's amazing, because I know, the normal protocol is you go out, you interview a few attorneys, you hire one, and then they send you all these forms that the state requires them to turn in. And you are just like, well, and they're like, I need it in, 14
Tomorrow.
days, have it by, or whatever. But and so if you're like me, you don't sleep for 2 weeks. And then on the eve of the morning that it's due, I try to pull an all-nighter because I need that stress, because I'm so avoidant and so scared, and I have no idea what this stuff is. And I honestly don't want to pick up and call my attorney because it's going to cost me. I mean, I was in LA and I got lucky that I was paying like, $600 an hour. Now it's $1,200. If I had someone to help me through it, at least explain why I'm doing it and what I'm doing, just so I can call.
That's a really huge point, Jackie. Because we know a lot of people that they hand it in incorrectly, and it's already submitted to the court. But then you're frustrated because your aggressive spouse on the other side hasn't handed in a thing. And so why are you meeting this quick deadline and then you get nothing in return? So it's really important to ask your attorney those questions. And for us, sometimes we have to backtrack and ask to redo the forms for the clients. But, understand why you have to hand that in, and what if you don't hand it in, and what if, ask those questions. They're not expecting you to ask. They're just expecting you to follow their instructions without asking any. And then they're going to ask you, what do you want? And I hate that question, because what do you want? Well, I want it all. Who doesn't want it all? So I want it all. Give it to me all. And I want nothing to change. And I want everything. So it's such a silly question to ask somebody that's not prepared. If you have 3 scenarios and you've done your expense work with us, then you can go in and say, this is what I need. And this is the scenario that I want. Now, can you go ahead and get me that?
Absolutely.
That would be the question, right?
And I'd rather have those conversations with you guys. And then, yes, you go into your attorney and you talk about it in the legal, perspective. But I'd rather have those conversations with you guys, because you are the financial experts. You in a legal system, you understand in the divorce setting, you understand why it's happening, the purpose behind it, and you can give me the 10 steps down the road, what we're doing here. A, I kind of don't want to pay my attorney to do that, but B, I'll go to them to help me execute it. And we'll sit down and figure out how we're going to execute it or make it happen. But all that back end stuff, I'd rather. So this leads me right into the question I warned you I was going to ask. Do you feel that people should meet with you before they even meet with an attorney? And if so, why? Or how do you see that playing out in the best case scenario?
Yes, 100%. If you have the opportunity to meet with us before, someone has filed for divorce, and you have that ability to prepare it's the best decision you can make. A lot of people, say, well, I don't know if I should pay you and my attorney, things like that, but they don't realize that financial discovery is so expensive. And we just talked about the financial disclosures. Attorneys take your information and you don't understand what that information, how that information is interpreted in the court system. I can promise you that your expenses and your assets and debts are very much interpreted differently than how you manage your household. So they're taking that information, they're relying on that information, and they tell you that you can amend it. However, you can't unsee what you already put out there. And it could be the beginning of your demise. And I don't mean to be so frank about it, but that is really the truth. So if you can learn how the courts interpret all this information, what is the date of division of your community property or your marital assets, and going through all of those various details, I can promise you, you will benefit not only from being able to make really good decisions, but you will benefit financially 150%.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, go ahead, Catherine. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to add to that because all of that is so true. And we could tell you 100 stories about that. In addition to that, even though you think you're dealing with a high conflict spouse, and if you're listening, you probably are, they still have to give this information in some shape, way, or form, right? So in our process, we invite a spouse to participate. So by inviting that spouse to participate, we have a very nice introduction letter that they get. And we offer them a phone call, which is typically with Karen, because she just talks about the process to them. And then I'll talk to them about their assets and debt. But give them the opportunity to give us data, because even if we get 2 statements from them, it could save you thousands of dollars in subpoenas later on. So even if they only participate for a little bit of time, the conversations that we have with them, especially business owners who love to tell us how right they are about everything, and they love to just kind of throw up this information. And a lot of times some of them could be correct about things because they want their spouse to understand the cash flow isn't necessarily meeting their lifestyle. So they want to explain that to us, but that explanation and the data, that the documents that we ask them for to verify, we never tell them that they're lying, but we just need the documents to verify it, will save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars later on. So I love that part of our process. Of course, I'm on that end of the process, but I love that part of the process because I always say, let's give them the benefit of the doubt to show what they'll share and what they won't share. And then we know how to word that with your attorney of what we tried to get, what we couldn't get, what you need. And again, it will save you in what direction you need to go post planning.
I love that because what I'm thinking, I'm putting myself back in time. And when you guys tell me that, first I'm worried that like, okay, if he talks to you, you're going to fall under his spell. He's a really good manipulator. And then he will have turned all the people on my team and convinced them that there is no money, even though we just bought a $4 million house and driving $100,000 cars, because he's explaining to everyone, just look at my spreadsheet, we don't have any money. And I'm so afraid you guys are going to believe him. But I love what you said. You're like, no, 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 no. Let them talk. Let them spin their web and whatever. And you've been there. You divorced someone who's probably pathological. Let's get information. When people talk, we gather information and we say, oh, really? Okay. And then we'll just ask for all those documents to back that up. And they can't have it both ways. They can't have it both ways. So,
I had this conversation with a spouse yesterday, and in the beginning he said, and I had known that he did advances to equitable distribution from the wife. She had looked at it and saw it. And I had said to him, oh, how's your summer? Oh, good. Have you been traveling? Yeah, I've been traveling. And I already knew this. I've been traveling. And oh, yeah, I know. I see you're into artwork and all of these things. Oh, yeah, I bought some stuff later. So then I bring up advances to equitable distribution a half an hour later. Well, no. I didn't travel that much. And I didn't. Everybody just said it. So, and listen, they're going to negotiate on an amount because some is legit, some might not be. Not that it's not legit, but she should have some of that back.
Right.
But I love that our platform allows for them just to be honest and get to the root of what's happening here. And, then they can both make a decision moving forward, because you don't want 2 attorneys going back and forth about that. You won't get it back, and you'll spend more than whatever the advance was trying to argue it. And so have a space where you can have this open conversation, and NDS, that's our method. if they're willing to participate, we're certainly willing to provide the platform for both parties to be heard, because in divorce, you both want to be heard.
Yeah, I love that. No, like I said, because and I want people to hear that because I would have been afraid to put him in front of you guys, but the way you just explained it, absolutely. Let's get him on the phone and let him talk and see
Well,
what we
Jackie,
find
to
out.
that point, Karen, you remember years ago when we started inviting spouses to participate? It was a very complex case. And literally, um, our client was the wife, and she was mad at me.
Oh,
She
yeah.
said, she was so mad. She said, "You're siding with him. You believe him." My file was this thick. I don't know if you can see me. If you can't see me, what is this, about 5 or 6 inches?
Yeah, yeah,
That's how
yeah.
thick, that's how much information we gathered. And I'm going to respect him as a businessman for giving this information. And how am I going to have an open dialogue if I'm not respecting him, or I'm not appreciating what he's giving it? But she was interpreting that as he's getting me under his spell, of which he was not. But that's when I learned that I have to tell our clients, listen, it's going to sound like I might be siding with him, and it's going to sound like that I'm believing everything he's saying. Like, we have to set that up now. So I appreciate your point there, because we actually have learned from that.
No, I'm really glad we're going off on this tangent because, and especially because I am really on a soapbox here that people need to call you and get you involved in their divorces. And they know who they're talking to. And these people want to tell, it's someone who's smiling and nodding and like, wow. And, and well, they know what they're doing, you guys. They're just getting more and more information, letting them talk. And you're right. It might look like you're making a bestie, but you're not. You're not.
No.
Right.
You know who your client is, but you know exactly what you need to do, to get as much information as you can. And that, yeah, it doesn't mean you have to walk around hating this guy who wants to carry that around. You know who they are. You do this all day long.
It honestly helps them too, because if the spouse can understand what the cash flow is, and they can understand what the risk is of keeping certain assets that are leveraged and all of that, it helps our client to understand that, and then it helps the spouse that everybody's understanding it, so that you don't spend so much in a litigation process, that you actually can come to mutually agreeable terms.
Right. And if you have even a little bit of rapport with the spouse, then when your client's sitting down with your two or three different proposals you come up with, and we'll get into that, but they're maybe more likely to go like, okay, I know where this proposal's coming from or why he or she's negotiating for this. I know the financial people he or she's working with, and I have a little rapport with them, so I feel a little more comfortable negotiating his or her points, coming from you as a client. So speaking of, can we go backwards a little bit and you guys talk about the because Karen, you mentioned it for a second, but how you actually, or what you do, you put together 2 or 3 scenarios that your client might settle for. How does that work?
Yep. Catherine, go ahead and talk about that because that's your superpower.
So it's our financial portrait. So our financial portrait could be, I don't know, 30 pages, Karen, somewhere around that. And so what it is, it's your background information, and then it's your inventory of all the data you gave us. So all the documents you gave us, you only have to give it to us, and then we can share it with your other professionals. So you don't have to give it to all your professionals every time. So it's all inventoried with us. And then it's your expenses, your lifestyle analysis, and then it's your property statement. So it's all your community property. If you're in a community property state, it's all your statement of marital estate. And then if you have separate property, there's a report that has community and separate, or marital and separate property. And then it's division scenarios, and it might just be one division scenario, or it might be 3 division scenarios. So if a spouse participates and the parties come up to an agreed division scenario, then we will write a written summary to match the division scenario, because attorneys like to read things in Word. And then that's all your attorneys need to process your divorce and your formal agreement. We're not attorneys, so we don't put any legal language in there. If a spouse participates and they don't come to an agreement, we don't write a summary, but we might have husband's proposed scenario, wife's proposed scenario, and they could just take that to mediation to see how far off they are. And then we'll have table of recommendations and considerations, meaning everything that you need to consider for all your assets and all your debt. So it's actual questions in there. So what you need to consider, and you can ask the attorney, or you can ask the mediator or you can even ask your coach, meaning you, how you can get through that. So it's really everything is geared towards the finances. If it's an appropriate or if it's required, we will do spousal support calculations, child support calculations, alimony discussions, and sometimes a calculation there. So it's a
Retirement account valuations.
what was that?
Retirement account
Retirement account
valuation. Yeah.
valuations. Then we have, real estate and business review reports that we do because we research all your real estate. We look into your businesses, what documents are needed for valuations. We won't value your business, but we will go through the documents needed. And so it's a pretty extensive report that you get. You're really prepared. So that's why
And we will provide to you and to your spouse or your attorney what documents were requested, what was provided, and what is still outstanding, the deficiency list, because in that space is where financial discovery goes awry, right? All those interrogatories and requests for reduction goes out, spouse gives about half of what's needed, and nobody follows up. And somehow our clients think the judge is going to take care of that. Well, they're not. But, we do look for very specific business documentation, real estate documentation to support who owns it, how much do they own. Do you know how many times someone will get a K1 that's very different from an operating or shareholders agreement? So we get to the bottom of all of that. Who owns what? How much? Do you know how many times people think they own real estate and there's these third party owners on the deed that they never knew about that has to be addressed? So we really do go through the detail of your marital estate so that you're making really good decisions. And our hope is that your marital settlement agreement will reflect everything you need to have a good sound document.
And sometimes if you're in the process, we have to pivot and get you ready for mediation. Some people come with the heels of mediation being a month away. So we just quickly get to their expenses. We quickly get to their division scenarios and give them those reports just so they're ready for mediation. I mean, even getting the minimal reports is being better prepared than getting no report.
Oh, absolutely. And I almost want to cry when you talk about K1s and percentage owned of companies or businesses or properties, because my ex just kept saying that he owned a percent of a percent of a percent of a percent, but there was never any documentation to show it. And as much homework as I did, and I'm really proud of myself, I learned a lot, and I know a lot, more compared to before the divorce, but we still never got to the bottom of a lot of that. And because your attorney doesn't know, and their answer is, let's go hire a forensic. A forensic doesn't know half the time. And it's just infuriating to me because forensics are overused. They're not needed. And in so many cases, and they're the wrong tool for the job. That's it. Nothing against them.
Your attorney says, don't worry, after divorce, if you find anything, you can come back and fight for it. I love that too.
Catherine, if I had a nickel for every time they and don't worry, if they're hiding anything, then it's 100% yours.
My goodness.
So don't worry. And oh my God, I heard that so many times. But no, they're just the wrong tool for the job. 99.9% of the time, it's you guys. That's what I want people to hear. Forensics, in my opinion, in all the cases I've helped out with, very rarely are needed. So,
and by the way, because we keep mentioning K1, if you're listening,
a
K1 is not the value to your business. So you'll see on the K1 the capital account on the bottom right hand corner, and it might say 100,000. That doesn't mean that's the value of that business. So we see that a lot too. So really understanding what these numbers are really can save yourself from making a huge financial mistake or decision moving forward.
Right. And that's a good point that you even mentioned that, Catherine, because you guys can explain that to me. A, I don't want to spend the time with my attorney to pay them, but B, they probably can't explain it. No offense, guys, but they can't. And you guys can, and you can tell me what a document can tell me and what it can't tell me. And if you have a spouse that has many LLCs and all that stuff gets very complicated and the information isn't obvious. And I didn't even realize that these were all supporting documents that the IRS doesn't have. I didn't realize, and then when I finally went to my accountant and he refused to hand them over, he said, I have to call my attorney, and hung up. When I said, those are my tax returns. Those are my form. You have to give them to me. You did that, tax return in my name with my social security number on it. It's my information. And he said, I have to call my attorney, and he hung up.
Well, here's a tip for that, because many of you have filed for October. I don't know when this podcast is being released, but Do not sign the tax return unless you have a copy of the supporting documents. So when they're asking you to sign, you can say, okay, great, I'm happy to sign this, but please give me copies of the supporting documents first. That's
Yep.
your only hold over them.
And put it in an email, preferably if you have to, a text. But yes. Oh,
Mhm.
thank you for that. See, no one's even actually suggested that in all the conversations I've had because they have you sign the tax return at the 11th hour. They tell you it's your fault, right? That it's going to be late if you don't sign it. They refuse to show it or explain it to you. If you're sort of the out spouse that's not been doing the tax returns, and so I love that because I didn't even know. So people, there are a lot of supporting documents that go with your tax return that don't go to the IRS. Your accountant, most likely, if you have an accountant, is holding on to them. Demand to see them. I love it.
And if they say, I can't, just say, so are you telling me that you put this number down on my tax return without having documentation to prove it? And do that in writing.
I love it. And here's the thing, just take photos of it or copies of it or whatnot. You're going to get it you may not understand it. That's okay. Just get the copies so that
Yes.
you have that information for the
If it
future.
has numbers on it, make a copy of it.
If it
Yeah.
has, if it has numbers on
100%.
it, make a
Yeah.
copy of it.
Copy of it. And we'll
Yeah.
figure it all out from there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to kind of get into some juicy, fun questions. What are the big shenanigans you've seen people play when it comes to finances and divorce? Because that's who this audience is dealing with. So I'm just curious, some
Um,
things you've seen.
we could just talk about recent things. So
Mhm.
recently, we have a client who is going to mediation, settlement conference in the next month or so. So when that happens, we compare the balance sheets from the pre-trials coming in, opposing counsel, ours, and our client's counsel. Do you know how often numbers, assets get missed? Numbers get misreported. And this last one we found, you know which one I'm talking about, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm going to need a shot of tequila right now
Oh,
because
yeah, I know.
I could not
There's so
sleep
many
last
stories
night
just in the
thinking
last 2 weeks. It's
about.
insanity.
I'm
Yeah.
still pissed off about this, actually.
It was to the tune, well, they missed the real valuation of the annuities and the life insurance policy. They picked up the dividends instead of the value. They left off a whole real estate property. So by the time it was done, it was almost $1 million of missed assets just because they're rushing to get this done. They're, even though they have our documentation, right? They're still rushing. That was a big miss. So, I'm on the call with the client and counsel to say, I'm going to send over my reconciliation sheet. And so can you please amend your pretrial and please assure us that your clients, and I mean, the attorney was, oh my God, I can't believe I did this, but it happened. And it could have been very detrimental had someone not caught that, but it happens all the time. Catherine, you have more stories.
Let me just back that story up a minute.
Okay.
Because this client did his portrait. So he had his portrait. And so Karen was acting as his legal liaison. It's an ad hoc service that we have. So she's on the appointment. So she says, Catherine, I looked at the portrait and I looked at the attorneys. Our numbers are like, they're so off. And I was like, well, let me see. Let me see the statement. When I saw that the attorney put down the dividends as the value, he put the dividends as the value, which was like $125,000. The value was $600,000 or $700,000. That's a $500,000 mistake on one item. I mean, Karen mentioned the real estate and so forth. But I just want you to know, if you're listening, dividends is not the value to negotiate. Dividends are just like interest. You do not put that number down as your account value. But this client, he's happy in his life right now. He's moving on. He didn't want the divorce, but he's moving on. He really sees his wife. So he was overlooking it because he's getting ready to move on. And so because we're in it still with him, we're able to point that out. But if we didn't point it out, he may not have caught it until post-divorce. He may have said, well, wait a minute, that wasn't the value. But if he signed that, he would have been shed of luck. So you really have to be your own advocate. And that's why you'll hear Karen and I constantly every day preach financial clarity. It's knowing your numbers, knowing where it might be a little bit off. You're not in crazy town if you know your numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not in crazy town if you know your numbers, but you have to have someone watching your back for you because you are emotional or you are super excited to just move the heck on,
Yeah.
or or you're just so mired down in so much information and there's new information every month that goes by and you're just, I won't go through them all, but you're raising a couple of memories that I have as well of one client that, I mean, at the 11th hour sat straight up in bed at midnight, was like, oh, whatever happened to that
Oh my goodness.
$240,000 blah, blah, blah that we were talking about last year. That's completely just fallen off the radar, and she jumped out of bed and dug it back up and, brought it into the meeting the next day. And everyone was like, oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
but she was on her case. And then I have another one, similar story, like same thing. They would get all the summaries back from the attorney and she'd be like, oh, they did it again. They missed two very important line items. Gee, this is the third time. But because she was on it and she kept looking, I'd rather have you guys in my corner. So I can sleep at night and you're running into Catherine's office, Karen, and you're like, why doesn't this make sense? And she's like, let me tell you why. So that's amazing. And thank you. And I have to tell you guys, their podcast, We Chat Divorce, is so awesome because I got hooked on it like you get hooked on, I don't know, Housewives. I don't watch any of those shows, but
Oh, I do.
because you guys, they go through some of their cases and I love it. It's so addicting to listen to like the story. So please go to We Chat Divorce, their podcast. I didn't know if I talked
And
about
you were
that in the
just on
beginning.
there. You were just on as our guest. You were a great guest. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
there's a little foreshadowing. Yes, you may hear Jackie Miller on their podcast
You're
as well.
definitely going
So
to hear Jackie Miller for sure. The great asset we had. There's another case. If you're listening and you're one of our southern states, southern states, if you're asking for spousal maintenance or support, every state calls it. So this was a North Carolina case or South Carolina, one of the Carolinas. Anyway, wife's blindsided by husband. Completely devastated. He wants a divorce and he's got a girlfriend and he's open in public and he's introducing the kids to it. Really hurtful. I felt so sorry for her. So her case was going on for a while and he starts shutting her off of his income. So her attorney's getting involved. They're trying to get her income and she has to move out of the house because she can't afford it. And he's moving in and he's having the girlfriend move in. And this is all within a year's period of time. Her girlfriends tell her, you know what, you need to start feeling better about yourself. Let's get you on a date just so you feel good about yourself. And she's like, oh no, I don't think I'm ready for that. No, 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 you should do this. She goes on a couple of dates and invites him over just to have a nightcap or what have you. I don't know. I'm not judging, but she invites him over. And do you know, husband has a PI, takes a photo of the gentleman going in just this one time. She just negated her need for her right to spousal support because you cannot date within the year of your separation while you're separated in the Carolinas.
That was North Carolina, by the way.
And get spousal support. So this poor woman now who didn't have a job because she was a stay-at-home mom now could not get spousal support just because she went on a few dates during the 1 year separation.
And the date was in her home. The PI report said the date was in her house long enough for the act to have occurred.
wow. Okay. I have been doing this for like 6 years now, and I thought I'd heard every story. I did not know that about the Carolinas. And you can't date. Okay, this is a whole nother podcast. Does that go for the men too?
No, you could date if you're the payer. So her husband had a girlfriend moving in with him within the year. She went on just a couple of days to feel better about herself, encouraged by her friends, which is totally a normal feeling, and then screwed herself
I am
financially.
using all my restraint to not go on the whole patriarch thing, which I don't honestly actually do very much, but oh my God.
Yeah.
They've set up a system by where these guys have a loophole to get out of spousal support if they go on a date.
In that year separation period. Now, other states aren't like that. You can date all you want.
Right,
But
right, right.
This state, if you're asking for spousal support, you cannot
You know that there's certain in every state you should know certain parameters.
Yeah.
Just to financially protect yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't realize in California that, so say I stayed in the house, like while the divorce drug on a couple of years, if he had moved out, about how they can charge back basically the value of the rent. Yes. I was like, excuse me, I don't have a job and I don't have, anyway, you guys, the watch charges, you guys can look that up. But yes, there are things in every state that you can get majorly screwed on.
Yeah.
And you're like, how is that a thing?
It's a thing all day long.
Yeah. You spend your inheritance to pay for your expenses while you're waiting for your support. Guess what? You're not getting that back.
I had a client, she's like, he's cut me off completely and I guess I'll just use this money, that I was like, no, pretend like that doesn't exist. Like, do not use that money. You have to go in for temporary support. Cause I had a client, same thing, using her her
There's so
inheritance.
many little things. And these are, innocent things you're thinking as you're moving through the process. But they're just so impactful. They're things you really just need to consider. And, for us, it's not about us telling you what to do. And
Right.
we're not going to tell you what you should get. And we're not going to tell you what option we think is best for you. But what we're going to do is ask you questions from listening to you to see how it's going to impact your life. And when you answer your own questions and you have the data, I'm going to go back to the data to support that, then you're going to make a good decision for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You sure are. And so, you guys, I know mydivorcesolution.com. I believe your Instagram is the same. There's like people can go to your site and they answer some questions, or there's an assessment. How does that work?
Yeah. So they answer, I think it's 8 to 10 questions, and it really just starts the education process. These are the basic components of a marital estate, but that we go through that assessment on an initial call to talk about what their goals are, what are the critical issues in their marital estate or community property. And we do that because our pricing is a fixed fee based on the complexity of their marital estate, not the value, the complexity. So we know generally what type of accounts and assets and debts we'll need to analyze for them. So there's a method to that, but it's also very instrumental in starting the education process, because once you complete that assessment, you'll get a return email talking about why those questions and your answers are so important.
That's amazing. So you guys go to mydivorcesolution.com, take the assessment. The earlier, the better. Even if you're thinking about divorce and you think it's looming. But it sounds like, Catherine, you had mentioned too that sometimes people come in, they've got, a settlement coming up. So it might not be too late, but reach out to them and find out. I would have paid you guys double whatever your fixed fee is, and you would have saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can tell you that right now. Hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have gone in my pocket because it would have still been part of the settlement rather than paying forensics and just attorneys that, just were because I didn't know. I wasn't doing my homework.
You
So
bring that up, and I'm glad you did before you end this conversation, because our lowest fee is $5,500. So it's not like we're not there's not going to be a fee there, but they don't understand some of the assessment calls that you're saving yourself probably 10 grand in the first month with your attorney to go nowhere. You mentioned, I don't know if it was on this podcast or another time we talked to you about the emails going back and forth and what you paid for that. And I think sometimes you might think, and we have broken it down into 3 phases now to help people understand that. But, it does save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not the minimum tens of thousands of dollars.
absolutely. I mean, I can just tell you from experience, this isn't, you're like, oh, but my money is going away from an attorney to them. That's not how it is. You guys are protecting yourself and you are going to save. So this is me saying this, Jackie Miller. I can tell you right now, you're going to save thousands and thousands of dollars if you put your investment with Catherine and Karen, and you're going to save so much money on your attorney. I'm going to tell you right now, and God forbid they're suggesting a forensic unless you have a wildly crazy, complicated financial case. Your money has to go to them. I'm just dead serious. I wish I could turn back the clock, go back in time. It'd be so fun to see how my case turned out. And even if it was just like I said, all that money I would have saved that resulted in no good outcome for me. And at least all those fees would have still been in the pot to be split up. Mm-hmm. And I would have gotten some of it.
Mm-hmm. You would know where to and what assets to invest your money in going after, whether it be seen or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And you guys had also mentioned, and then I'll we could wrap this up, but like having your you ended up back in court a year later, even with all your legal and financial expertise. And the same thing happened to me. We did find like some loans that were due my ex at the 11th hour right before we settled, because I'm like, there's just not enough money for me to live on. And they said, fine, when he gets these loans back, those can be yours too. The agreement was written not well. They were if he gets the money back. Mm-hmm. He did give me a little of it, but he chose to not give me a lot of it at the end. And he said, sorry, I didn't get paid back, so you don't get paid back. Mm-hmm. And it was honestly, it was a lot of money. And so have the right people on your team and have the right people.
We could go with stories. We have 100 of those stories. It's terrible. Yeah. we could talk to you forever.
We could talk forever, and I might have to have you back because there's literally like 20 questions I didn't get to. But
I would love to come back.
I loved this episode. You guys, you're right. I could talk to you forever. Thank you so much for doing what you do. It's absolutely at mydivorcesolution.com. You guys, please go there and check them out because you absolutely need them for your case.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie.
All right. Hopefully I'll see you both soon.
Yeah.